Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating, and air restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Trebas Foundation, Darlene Marcos Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
Budget cuts are coming for the city of San Diego, and council members want public input early. Thanks for joining us. I'm John Carroll in for Maya Trabulsi. As KPBS reporter Alexander Nguyen tells us, the public is usually invited to participate in budget talks around May.
The stark financial realities we face today will be a true test of our resolve.
Closing a $170 million budget deficit last year, the city of San Diego is facing a $258 million budget shortfall this upcoming fiscal year. At the State of the City address in January, Mayor Todd Gloria said the city is out of options and one-time fixes and must make some difficult cuts.
No gimmicks, no Hail Mary passes, no cavalry is coming to save us. Steep cuts will be necessary. But I also want to be clear that I'm not interested in just slashing our way to a balanced budget.
Previous administrations have balanced the budget by cutting services such as library hours and by deferring maintenance on roads. The effects of that are still being felt as hundreds of roads received failing grades last year. But Council President Joe LaCava says everything is on the table in terms of cuts.
So we have a variety of things that we're going to be looking at. Some of them are going to be very tough conversations, but we're ready for those conversations going forward.
LaCava says the council will focus on preserving core services such as police, fire, and lifeguards, and build up from there.
People don't care what bucket of money we're using. They don't care what the name of a department is. They want to know, are the services going to be delivered? Are the programs going to be delivered? And that's what I'm really hoping with more public input earlier in the conversation.
The public usually isn't invited to comment on the budget until after the preliminary version is released around April. But this year, the council is taking that feedback starting next week.
Community input is critical to the budget development process.
Council member Henry Foster III is the chair of the Budget Committee. He noted that underserved communities typically have borne the brunt of the budget cuts in the past and wants to ensure that doesn't happen this time.
My goal is to ensure that we retain focus on delivery of core services in a well thought out and equitable manner.
The council will hold a public input session this Monday at 6 p.m. at City Council Chambers. Alexander Nguyen, KPBS News.
Well, happy Thursday, everyone. As we head into the weekend, I am tracking some rainy weather in the forecast here for Friday. But then after that, the great weather works its way back in starting Saturday. Sunday's looking pretty good as well. And as we head into early parts of next week, I am tracking mild, breezy, and pretty nice weather here as we head into next week. I'll have details on that updated forecast coming up.
President Donald Trump's offer to buy out federal employees has been delayed. A federal judge paused today's deadline while more proceedings on its legality play out. Several federal unions filed a lawsuit requesting the pause. The deferred resignation offer allows eligible employees to leave their jobs, but supposedly be paid through September. At least 40,000 workers have already accepted the buyout. Meanwhile, more than 160 workers at the Environmental Protection Agency were placed on paid administrative leave. That's according to CNN sources. The impacted employees worked in the agency's Office of Environmental Justice and External Civil Rights. The move comes after President Trump's executive order to end all diversity, equity, and inclusion programs and offices. The employees were told they could still take advantage of the buyout program even though it was put on pause. San Diego is suing several social media companies alleging their conduct constitutes a public nuisance. KPBS reporter Melissa May says the lawsuit claims the companies use behavioral and neurobiological techniques to induce students to compulsively use their social media platforms.
San Diego County leaders, school officials, and students gathered to announce the lawsuit against Meta, Google, Snapchat, YouTube, and TikTok. County Supervisor Tara Lawson-Remer says the companies know exactly what they're doing.
Addiction is profitable. And it's not just Meta, Snapchat, TikTok, YouTube, all use the same tricks. Infinite scroll, autoplay, algorithms designed to keep our kids trapped on an endless loop. It's not an accident, it is their business model.
Mount Everest Academy 10th grader Vihan Bardwag says social media used to help him connect with his extended family, but things have changed.
Instead of connecting me, social media kept me disconnected as ever, keeping me lost in chasing the deceptively perfect lives of the seemingly perfect influencers that I was targeted to. This is when I realized that social media capitalizes on vulnerability. It capitalizes on insecurities.
Richard Barrera is a San Diego Unified board member. He says he sees the impact of social media on students.
It means our young people are sleeping less, are experiencing more depression, more anxiety, in some cases leading to suicidal ideation. And then it affects the relationships that young people have with each other. It increases bullying.
Lawson-Remer says they are seeking financial damages for the money the county is spending to treat the mental health crisis that she says social media addiction fuels.
Financial penalties to help compensate us are important, but ultimately that's not sufficient. We need these companies to stop designing their platforms in a way that creates addiction. So we're looking for real reforms in how these platforms operate.
A Google spokesperson responded to the lawsuit in a statement saying, quote, "Providing young people with a safer, healthier experience has always been core to our work." End quote. The allegations in these complaints are simply not true. The other companies did not respond by our deadline. Melissa May, KPBS News.
Allstate Insurance says it will pay out nearly $1.5 billion in claims due to the wildfires that swept through Los Angeles last month. The insurance giant said it was able to limit its losses partly by pulling back from the California market. The company is one of many insurers that have been canceling homeowners' policies in many parts of California due to the growing threat of wildfires. That leaves many homeowners with more expensive and often limited alternatives. Some end up with no insurance coverage at all. Now, a follow-up to a story we reported last month about a Catholic school at risk of closing. Fundraising and new student enrollment efforts proved unsuccessful for St. Catherine Drexel Academy, a TK-8 school in El Cerrito. KPBS education reporter Katie Anastas says it will close at the end of the school year.
The school had until February 1st to raise $500,000 and enroll 30 new students. They raised more than $100,000 and no new students enrolled. Steve Carter's children attend St. Catherine Drexel Academy. He says the school community has grown even stronger since they first got word in October that the school might close.
Had that community not been there, had that sense of, pride not been there, it would have been very easy to just say, once that letter came out, to say, okay, we're going to a different school. But this community was really important to us. It means a lot to us. Hopefully we all stay together, even though, we're going to all be dispersed to different schools.
The diocese said in October that the school faced a $300,000 deficit this year and likely a bigger one next year. The diocese had covered previous year's deficits, but said it no longer could. It filed for bankruptcy last summer after hundreds of alleged sexual abuse victims sued. Unlike St. Catherine Drexel Academy, most Catholic schools in San Diego are connected to a parish led by a priest. Those parishes often make financial contributions to their schools.
As we've gone to these other schools, we have seen that these other schools have business development leads, they have marketing leads, they have a more robust front office. And St. Catherine Drexel did not have that.
The diocese says students who stay at St. Catherine Drexel through the end of the school year will receive a $1,000 tuition discount at another Catholic school for next year.
This isn't anything anybody is happy about. And, we hope that, the students and families will take advantage of other Catholic schools in the community.
Eckery says the $102,000 raised through major donations will go back to the donors. Parents also raised more than $12,000 through a GoFundMe campaign. Carter says they're figuring out how best to spend it. He says ideas include an end-of-the-year celebration, additional field trips, and offsetting 8th grade graduation fees. Katie Anastas, KPBS News.
Major League Baseball wants the brother of late Padres owner Peter Seidler to run the team as an ownership dispute plays out in court. Today, league owners voted for John Seidler as the team's control person. Sheil Seidler, Peter Seidler's widow, recently filed a lawsuit trying to prevent such a move. She claims Peter wanted her to succeed him. In the lawsuit, Sheil Seidler claims the Seidler brothers are maneuvering for a potential sale or relocation of the Padres. MLB Commissioner Rob Manfred says there is no discussion or concerns about either of those allegations. The San Diego City Council recently voted to increase parking meter rates to help close a budget deficit of more than $250 million. More changes could be on the horizon. KPBS Metro reporter Andrew Bowen says parking policy has long been a third rail in San Diego politics, but crumbling infrastructure and the ongoing threat of climate change are forcing the city to change course.
If you've swiped your credit card at a parking meter in San Diego lately, you may have gotten sticker shock. The hourly rate at most meters is now $2.50, twice as much as it was a few weeks ago.
It's been years, if not decades, since we've done something like this.
Jordan Moore is a staffer with the Independent Budget Analyst's Office. It found even the city's new rate of $2.50 an hour is a steal compared to private lots and garages. San Diego has billions of dollars in unfunded infrastructure needs and a structural deficit of more than $250 million. Moore says subsidizing parking via discounted rates is getting harder to justify.
The city has large budget problems. There's only so many levers we can pull. So to the extent that there are levers the city can pull to solve these problems, we should pull them.
The big problem with not charging enough for parking is that people tend to use it in ways that are pretty inefficient.
Henry Grabar is a staff writer at Slate Magazine and author of Paved Paradise, How Parking Explains the World.
One thing that happens when parking is underpriced is that it tends to fill up really quick. And so these spaces where there's a lot of demand for parking, but it's not properly priced, generate thousands and thousands of miles of driving every year from people looking for parking spaces.
Grabar's book chronicles a notorious case study of how not to manage city parking meters. In 2008, Chicago was facing a budget crisis, so it signed a deal with a group of Wall Street investors. For $1.15 billion, those investors won the right to lease the city's parking meters for 75 years. The investors promptly jacked up the rates and made back their investment in no time. Today, parking meters in Chicago charge up to $7 an hour.
I think the worst part for Chicago is even if the investors recognized the market clearing price for these meters, the money that was raised is going right into the investors' pockets rather than being funneled into improvements in the city of Chicago.
Committee members, good afternoon, and thank you for having us here today.
Privatizing street parking is nowhere on the agenda in San Diego, but a number of other parking reforms are.
And we're here to give you an update on the results of a parking demand management study that we recently concluded.
At a city council committee meeting last week, staffers shared an analysis of more than 16,000 public parking spaces in meter zones and at major attractions like Balboa Park. To increase the availability of parking, the city is considering a host of changes, like charging for parking on Sundays when private lots raise their rates because free street parking is so hard to find. It could also implement dynamic pricing. For example, meters around Petco Park could get more expensive during ball games. Jordan Moore of the city's Independent Budget Analyst's Office says some meters could also get cheaper.
You might be able to lower parking rates at certain times to try to entice demand to come at different times. And so that's what dynamic pricing is all about, is trying to match up that supply and demand to create the optimal situation and utilization of the curb space.
Of course, raising parking rates isn't exactly popular, but the revenue it generates can be spent on things that are popular, like planting trees, fixing sidewalks, and improving public transit service. Things that also reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Moore says San Diego hasn't done much of that because parking meter revenue just hasn't amounted to much.
If you can improve ways for people to get to an area without needing their car, that is a huge benefit to the amount of parking that you need to supply, right? Fewer cars means fewer competition for spots, means that, those spots can either turn over faster, be more readily available, those kinds of things.
As San Diego continues to grow, demand for parking will only get more intense, and the lines between commercial streets and residential streets are increasingly blurred. Many of the new apartments in the city don't come with an off-street parking space. But so far, all the reforms the city is contemplating are for short-term parking around businesses and attractions. Charging more residents for long-term street parking is not on the table, at least for now. Andrew Bowen, KPBS News.
The pandemic is firmly in the rearview mirror at San Diego International Airport. The airport announced today more people flew in and out of it in 2024 than ever. The previous busiest year was 2019, just before the pandemic hit. An airport spokesperson says the addition of 2 new airlines and increased international service contributed to the numbers. 25.25 million passengers used San Diego International last year. In 2019, the number was just a little over 25 million. After air travel accidents occur, such as the deadly mid-air collision in Washington, D.C., or near Washington, D.C., the consequences can reach further than those directly impacted. Incidents like this can also increase people's fear of flying. Ivan Rodriguez explains what people can do to manage it.
Aerophobia is one of the most common phobias affecting more than 25 million adults in the U.S., according to the Cleveland Clinic. It most commonly affects people between the ages of 17 and 34. Dr. Gail Salt says there's a difference between flight anxiety and a flying phobia.
A true phobia has diagnostic symptoms. They are more than 6 months of a degree of fear that they know at some level is irrational, their degree of fear, that causes a constellation of very specific symptoms.
Some physical symptoms include fast heartbeat, sweating, chest pain, and vomiting.
They might have emotional symptoms that are, I'm thinking about something happening on this flight. I feel terribly afraid. I feel like I could die. I feel, I've got to escape. This is horrendous.
Or there might be behavioral symptoms that make someone cancel a flight last minute or decide to take an alternate transportation that's much longer or more inconvenient to avoid flying. Even though there isn't one sole cause of flying phobias, Dr. Salt says there are ways people can overcome them.
Exposing yourself to the feared thing, having coping tools which help you manage the anxiety symptom.
Virtual reality treatment guided by a therapist can also help, as well as educating yourself on how safe flying is statistically.
The fact that these events have been happening doesn't mean that it is a more realistic fear to be having.
In Atlanta, I'm Ivan Rodriguez reporting.
Local health experts are urging families to get their kids the latest flu shot. The San Diego County Department of Public Health says nearly 80% of 5 to 17-year-olds have not received the vaccine. Vaccines are available even without health insurance at county health centers and community clinics. Visit myturn.ca.gov or call 211 for locations. County numbers show 3 local teenagers have died from influenza during the current flu season, and none of them were vaccinated. San Diego scientists have gone on a trip where they likely discovered dozens of new animal species. KPBS Sci-Tech reporter Thomas Fudge tells us what they found in the deep ocean where methane seeps through cracks in the earth below.
Yeti crabs live more than 1,000 meters below the Pacific Ocean off the shores of Costa Rica. They were one of the creatures captured on film and in hand by a team of scientists led by Scripps Institution of Oceanography. One of those voyagers to visit the seafloor in a 3-man submersible vessel was biologist Charlotte Seed. She manages Scripps' benthic invertebrate collection, where some of those deep-sea creatures have ended up.
For example, this jar is a basket star. You'll notice it's got many arms and each one is branched several times, so sort of look like a beautiful woven basket. This is one example from Costa Rica.
The dark sea floor Scripps explored is home to methane seeps. In the water off Costa Rica, submersible dives over the years have identified hundreds of species down there. A good portion of them had been undiscovered. The deep ocean floor is so dark there's no plants and no photosynthesis. But where seeps and vents are found, chemicals and minerals from them interact with underwater bacteria that become microbial food, the bottom of the food chain for sea animals. Down there you find crabs and shrimp. You find tiny creatures like this chitin, a sort of deep-sea armadillo.
There are also larger animals, sea cucumbers, sea stars, brittle stars.
And, of course, plenty of tube worms and clams.
So these are some of the most conspicuous animals you'd see. If you're down there in a submersible, you see tube worms and clams, you know you're at a methane seep.
If the bottom of the ocean devoid of light is like a desert, methane seeps are oases, nourishing a diversity of creatures. Seed descended thousands of meters in a submersible. They named it Alvin. She says the deep ocean is very peaceful. Now the work of identifying what may be many new species will begin. After discovering what may be a new form of life, scientists need to describe it to add it to the record of life on Earth.
When we describe a new species, we formally declare it to the world, like writing a birth certificate. You have to give it a name. You have to say who it's closely related to. Where did you find it?
Methane seeps, by the way, are pretty common. Seed says they are also found a few hours off the coast of Del Mar and La Jolla. Thomas Fudge, KPBS News.
This wet stretch of weather will continue here as we head throughout this evening and tonight. Overnight lows will be a mix primarily in the 50s, but the closer you get to the coast, the higher the rainfall chances will be here for tonight. But because of that cloud coverage, very mild for this time of year. Only getting down to 55 tonight for Oceanside and Camp Pendleton, 59 in downtown San Diego. Future track radar is showing that the showers will last here as we head throughout this evening, tonight, and throughout the day tomorrow. Here's 9 a.m. That drive time. We'll see cloudy skies, but most of the rainfall will slowly start to taper off. And by late afternoon, we'll actually start to see some clearing with sunshine here before the sun sets late Friday, heading into early parts of Saturday. So here's the overall setup for Friday. We'll see that heavy rainfall continuing across the Southern California coast. We'll have some pretty good snowfall accumulations up to the north. Temperature-wise here for your Friday, we'll see some showers ongoing here, especially across the coastal region. Highs will be a mix of mid-60s. Seasonable highs here for this time of year. We'll have some more variable temperatures there the farther inland you go. But then as we head into Saturday, most of the rainfall is going to be over, and then we'll be watching out for record-breaking temperatures across the desert southwest. But overall, a mild stretch of weather there for Southern California. So for the coast, your extended 5-day outlook will be tracking showers, even some rumbles of thunder possible here Friday afternoon across the coast. Overnight lows will be in the 40s. Highs will be in the mid-60s. And then, yes, after that, look at that weekend. If you like sunny skies and highs in the 60s, you will love the forecast for Saturday and Sunday. This nice weather will continue here even as we head into early parts of next week. The inland forecast still tracking those showers there for Friday. Temperatures will be a mix of mid-60s, even some upper 60s by Sunday, but overall it's going to be a pretty nice forecast here shaping up for us. Across the mountains, we'll see some more mild conditions, even though the rain will be in the forecast on Friday. Lots of sunshine before a big temperature drop by about midweek. And then across the desert, we'll see lots of sunshine here as we head into the weekend.
I'm Jeff Bennett. Tonight on the NewsHour, how a federal funding freeze is disrupting nonprofit organizations across the country. That's at 7 after Evening Edition on KPBS.
Some people watch the Super Bowl for the game, while others watch for the commercials. Companies spend millions of dollars for 30 seconds of your time, but the time it takes to make these ads is several months. Jen Sullivan sat down with a marketing executive to talk about the marketing magic that goes into making a Super Bowl commercial.
A high-stakes matchup for this year's Super Bowl, the Kansas City Chiefs taking on the Philadelphia Eagles. But the stakes are also high for advertisers. Fox, the broadcaster of this year's big game, says some companies paid more than $8 million for a 30-second ad spot.
We went all in to make sure that we have the best story.
Ricardo Marquez is the vice president of marketing for Michelob Ultra, one of the many beer brands owned by Anheuser-Busch.
At Anheuser-Busch, 260 plus ads. We have a clear playbook on how to win the Super Bowl.
This year's 60-second commercial,
What are two Michelob Ultras?
Called the Ultra Hustle. The ad features high-profile athletes being challenged by actors Willem Dafoe and Catherine O'Hara.
Would you consider playing us? For the Ultras.
In a friendly, yet highly competitive game of pickleball.
When it was pitched to me, I thought, this is funny.
We're in a friendly game of pickleball. We just happen to be animals on the court.
Creating this 60-second ad took almost a year of planning.
When we get to the production stage, securing talent, the director, location, and then all the post-production work, all of that takes immense time.
Marquez says it took 5 days just to film the commercial. And the goal of all this hard work and time?
Brand recognition and ultimately, of course, sales.
In a digital world, they also measure success by the buzz and engagement their ad gets online. That's one of the many reasons why they release the commercial before the big game. And as soon as this year's Super Bowl ends, it's back to the drawing board to focus on next year's commercial.
The pressure and the privilege of being in the Super Bowl stage.
For Consumer Watch, I'm Jen Sullivan.
Here's a look at what we're working on for tomorrow in the KPBS newsroom. The flu is peaking twice this winter. NPR's Morning Edition has more on the new trends with respiratory illnesses across the country. And KPBS Roundtable is discussing the state of education in San Diego County 5 years after COVID forced schools to shut down. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm John Carroll. Have a great evening.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating, and air restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marcos Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.